trying to get the Gruppetto organised going over the mountains, and make sure everybody's organised, Mark, so we can make it inside the time delay because we're on a pretty tight schedule. My name's Matt Keenan. I get the privilege of being the MC this year around. Last year I wasn't the MC. Mark Duncan took over those responsibilities and I got put under the microscope by Robbie McEwen up here and we got to do the Q&A. But today I get to turn the tables and do the Q&A once again. We've got a really good day in store for you. We're going to have a chat to Stuart O'Grady. He's Olympic Games gold medalist, Paris-Roubaix winner, multiple stages at the Tour, yellow jersey at the Tour de France, etc. He's now the race director at the TDU. So we're going to focus more with Stewie about his role at the Tour Down Under and a bit of the business side of cycling. You might have noted the group of bike mechanics up there in the right-hand corner, or to my right at least. They're students from the Victorian College for the Deaf, which Mark Duncan is heavily involved in, and they have a program which the teacher Ashley is running, and he's got those kids essentially on St Kilda Road running a bike shop. So they're learning real-life skills to then implement into the real world. The main reason that we're doing fundraising today is for Boys to the Bush, and we're going to hear from the CEO, Adam DeMamel. I think it is DeMamel. It is perfect. DeMamel at a bike event with middle-aged men who like to spend time in Lycra. So we're going to hear from Adam shortly about the great work that they do. So to set the tone for what today is all about, I'd like to welcome to the stage the man that helps organise it all from the Gruppetto Fund and Off the Wheel. Please put your hands together for Mark Duncan.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the 5th instalment of Off the Wheel. As Matt mentioned, my name's Mark Duncan. Amongst other things, I am the chair of the Gruppetto Fund, and I, in conjunction with my committee, are your hosts for the day. First of all, I'd like everyone to thank the crew from A Block, the Victorian College for the Deaf today. Now, that's a lovely applause, but in the deaf world, the applause is an acknowledgement by making a sound, which is a reasonably futile exercise in the world of the deaf. So in Auslan, we show appreciation and acknowledgement by doing this. So if we can give an Auslan acknowledgement. Gruppetto Fund, what do? We are a registered and governed charity. Our mandate is simply this, is to raise money to help disadvantaged and underprivileged children access sport, education and the arts. We have here today Dave McNamara from Food Bank, an amazing charity that does incredible work, and it's my hope that there's a chance for a connection between the organisations that we work with, such as Boys to the Bush, Grassroots Sports Club and Mirabel Foundation, and also Newsboys Foundation, who is our charity partner, if you like. So we raise the money and then they help us identify charities that fit what we're trying to achieve, and you'll see a great example of that at work today. Please be generous, please have a great time. You are and will remain our most welcome guests. Thank you.
Just before the mains is served, we're going to give you a bit of an insight as to why we're here and what we're raising funds for. You've heard a little bit about it already from Mark, but before we bring up Adam, who's the CEO of Boys to the Bush, I want you to take a look at the screens. We've got a short video to play you.
The biggest thing we're proud of is just the amount of kids that are engaged with us and the positive effect it's having on their lives.
That's a brief insight into it. You saw Adam up there on the screen. Please put your hands together for the co-founder and the CEO of Boys to the Bush, Adam DeMamel. So give us a bit of the background on the purpose of your organisation, the type of kids you have come through, and the outcomes that you're looking for those kids.
Thanks for having me along, guys. Firstly, I'm a really small part of a pretty big team now that are doing some pretty amazing things. We set up Boys to the Bush 5 years ago now and thought we'd run a few camps for kids that are battling and from all walks, and it's evolved into something much larger and have a much bigger impact than we ever thought it would have. To give you some context, I was fortunate enough to be on one of the camps a couple of years ago, and we sit around the fire and have a bit of a yarn. One of the questions came up at the time, and it was, what's the toughest thing you've been through in your life? I started, as when we do these sort of things, the staff start and we're open and honest, and I said, growing up, I lost a sister to cancer, and that was pretty tough. anyway, the kids all put their arms around you, and which is really nice. So we went round the circle, and the first two kids shared a pretty common sort of story. You know, it's been pretty crap growing up. I've never met my dad. My mum's a junkie. And the next one might be, dad's in jail, and I got taken off my mum. I live with foster parents or a nan or something like that. They were the first couple of stories, and that's kind of who we get along on the camps. The next few kids' stories changed a lot of stuff for us because it really highlighted a number of things to us, but how much some kids are dealt a really poor hand. So the third kid that came along, he said, 2 years ago, I walked into the bathroom and I found my mum had just drowned my baby sister. So we had a bit of a chat around that and put the arm around him, and he was a bit emotional. The next kid after him spoke about finding his brother hanging from a tree that his dad had murdered. The next kid spoke about witnessing his best friend at 11 years of age dying by suicide. The next kid spoke about how his dad's a bikie and his little sisters get used as prostitutes by dad's mates. The hardest part about hearing that was the normality in which it was spoken by these kids. That's just the cards they were dealt, and that's what life was. They weren't all that upset about it. Some of them were, which was kind of nice. But the normality in which it was said to us just was like, no, this isn't right, and we're trying to explain this to the kids that it's not right. So we run a load of programs now, and they're all intended around supporting kids to be better blokes as they grow up, because it's all environmental, it's all connections, as we know. And what we're all about now is providing a platform or a conduit for everyone to support kids in your community. And that support can be as little as, letting us bring a kid into your mechanics workshop to learn a little bit about what you do. It might be opening your gate to a farm to let us come and spend some time on your farm. And in terms of impact, this year we'll be in front of between 4,000 and 5,000 kids among all our programs. We're not going to change all their lives, I know that, but we'll certainly change plenty of them. And I was lucky enough to go along on Wednesday night to the function and hear Stuart speak, and as a non-cyclist I really enjoyed it. You might tell I'm not much of a cyclist. I'm not a cyclist at all. But it was really nice to go along and hear about it and learn about it. But the people that came together, there was 20 odd people there, and they all had a connection that brought them together, which was cycling. The kids we have, the only connection they have is Boys to the Bush. That's their family, that's their team, and that's what brings them together. Thank you.
Some frightening but amazing stories, and that is fundamentally why we're here today. We're going to have a bit of fun after the main meals are served, having a chat to Stewie and a chat as well to Mark. But when it comes to the auction and the fundraising, remember that's the reason why. Meals are about to be served. Enjoy the day. All right, before we get started with the interviews, we're going to interview two stars of Australian cycling. I'd like you to turn your attention to the video. We've got a short snippet on the career of Stuart O'Grady. To the chance of Stuart O'Grady. A dual stage winner at the Tour de France. He wore the yellow jersey on 2 occasions. He went to 6 Olympic Games. He won a gold medal in Athens in 2004. And in 2007, he became the first Australian to win that stone, to win Paris-Roubaix. Once again, put your hands together for Stuart O'Grady. You first went to the Olympics in 1992. You retired in 2013. We've got 15 minutes. How are we going to fit this in?
Yeah, I don't know. Even watching that video, I mean, you're old when it's there's about 6 pixels in a shot, don't you? And your career's not in HD. But it has been a good journey. Lots of good memories, lots of painful memories as well, some pretty big crashes. You don't win many occasions when you're a professional cyclist, but the ones that you do are very memorable.
And it's been able to come back from those falls, which is significant. There's that old cliche, it's not how many times you get knocked down, it's how many times you get back up. There was the image of you being whisked away from the Tour de France. I think that was 07 Tour de France. You and Michael Rogers had horrific crashes in that tour. Run us through the injuries from that crash.
Oh, great way to start, isn't it? Thanks, Matty. That one, I hit a pole at 90k an hour. So that was 8 ribs, 3 vertebrae, both collarbones, both shoulder blades, fractured skull, blood clot. Yeah, it was a good one.
And then your good friend, John Trevorrow, said to you as you were going through your recovery mode, he said, why don't you finish the season at the JCO Herald Sun Tour? It'll be nice and easy, nice and safe. And he managed to convince you to turn up to Bendigo to ride the Sun Tour.
3 months later, yeah. So, and it was pretty. I just gave myself a kind of silly imaginary goal where I remember still being in the hospital, and a part of the rehab was basically just trying to convince yourself in your mind that, okay, this is a really bad situation that we're in, but the only way it's going to get better is, we can sit here and be negative, but would give myself a little goal. And I said to Johnny, who I think Johnny did visit, put me down for the Sun Tour. And, if it happened or not, it just straight away got my mind over those certain, couple of weeks in ICU in France. But it, just gave me something to focus on that was positive when I was in a pretty crappy situation, and managed to get on the start line. Finished in the front group, actually. I think Matty Wilson, I think you won that Sun Tour. You won one of them.
You went the year after.
But yeah, it was great to be back on the bike and racing. I remember Dave Sanders, when I came into my first team meeting after that crash, he's like, what the hell are you doing here, Stewie? But, it wasn't about trying to win. It was just getting back on the bike and racing and going on, because I'd just come out of, obviously 07 was a pretty big year with winning Roubaix. That just proves the highs and lows of sport, I guess.
Yeah, I know it's not a particularly pleasant story to talk about that crash, but the reason I wanted to share that story is it's one of those things that doesn't turn up on the results sheet, but it's what defines your character and that ability to come back, and that's why I wanted to share that story. The song that was played there, tell us about the significance of that song.
When I was rooming with Fabian Cancellara on every big one-day race, Fabian was like a little kid, really, and my job was to try and control him as the team captain. He's either on or off. And the morning of a big classic, he'd just wake up. He slept like a Swiss bear, seriously, and he'd wake up and he'd just be on, like it was race day for us. It was our grand final day, but we'd obviously have about 20 grand final days in a season. But on the big days like Paris-Roubaix, Tour of Flanders, or a Tour de France prologue, Fabian just woke up and he was just this ball of energy. I like U2, and that was my favourite song. So we woke up the whole hotel. We've got a Bose speaker, because we used to both carry around a Bose speaker in our suitcase. And we put on A Beautiful Day, absolutely flat out, and just let everyone know that we were ready to rock and roll. And we won, so it was pretty cool.
So the mind games start even before breakfast?
Oh, absolutely. They start well in advance of that. I mean, a lot of the racing is obviously what goes out on the road, but it's, the way that you actually get around the hotel. If you're coming into a meal as a team, we had a thing with CSC that there was, even though guys were getting massages and eating massages at different hours, we all came down to dinner as a team. So when we walked in that room, you'd have a couple of guys there and one from that team, and then the whole CSC team walked in together, and you're laughing and joking, and it was intimidating. We were trying to control the race before it even started.
Love that. Going back to your Olympic journey, it must have been amazing. You were 18 or 17 when you went to the Olympics in Barcelona. That must have been huge.
Yeah, it was. I had my 18th birthday just after the final, which we lost by 1.1 seconds, so it could have been a bit better of a birthday. But yeah, Barcelona was massive. As a young kid, I wasn't really focusing on Barcelona. I thought maybe Atlanta would be a little bit more of a realistic goal, but things happened very quickly. I was an Adelaide boy, and the Institute of Sport was in Adelaide, so I grew up riding my bike with the best riders the country had to offer. So, using a 13 and a 14-year-old, I'd tag on the back of the AIS team, and here I am trying to beat them up the hills, and under Charlie Walsh's guidance and I guess that inner drive and motivation to just push yourself. You know, for me, cycling was about the adventure and the journey, but, you know, how far can I push myself? How far can I ride? You know, even as a 15, 16-year-old, I was out there riding 10 hours a day, just having fun.
Obviously, you had self-belief in your ability on the track as well, because I think you went to the Games in Sydney and then the main focus was the road. You hardly touched the track bike and you put your hand up to be in the Olympic team to ride the Madison 4 years later in Athens. Yep. What made you believe you could win a gold medal?
Well, I don't know. I thought I could win a Madison. I'd ridden a few of them, and Brett Aitken and myself were pretty handy in the Madison days in the track, and I hadn't actually raced on the track for 4 years before. I think my last track race probably was Sydney, but I broke my collarbone in the Tour de France, so didn't have the best Olympics, but you know, I knew what to do and really used the Tour de France as a kind of training mechanism, just really focusing. I thought deep down Athens was going to be my last Olympics, and I really wanted to have a crack, and there was an opportunity there to ride the Madison. You know, I know what it's like. I didn't want to come in and take someone's spot that deserved it, but there was a bit of an opportunity there, and you know, those opportunities don't come around very often. Graham Brown had won the team's pursuit a couple of nights before, so I begged Brownie not to go out partying too hard, which he did, and you know, I said, mate, you can party as hard as you want after we win your second gold medal, all right? And now he's got 2 gold medals, so yeah.
How was it going into the team then? Because the track program was unbelievably successful. That was our best Olympics. It was raining gold medals. Anna kicked it off with a gold medal. Ryan Bailey won 2 gold medals, the team's pursuit as well. And then you turn up. Yeah,
well, I'd actually been over in Athens and ridden the road race, which was 265k the weekend before. Helped Robbie. I think I finished about 20th or something. Not too great, but I think Robbie finished about 6th. And then I actually flew back to my home in Toulouse in France, did a couple of days training behind the motorbike, and then flew back to Athens and walked into the village, because for the road team we were actually staying not in the Olympic Village. So went back into the village and just kind of rolled into the track team, and you know, the guys and the girls were, you know, taking the piss. Oh, Stuart, you're back in. You got to turn left when you go on the velodrome. Do you remember? Oh yeah, no, don't worry, mate. I remember. But you know, no one really knew what was going to happen. All I knew that I had really good form. I'd just ridden the Tour de France, which was, you know, 3,500 kilometres, and it was only a 50k race. So you know, easy. Just give it a go.
Looking at the images of your career summarised in 4 minutes, the second half of your career was mainly at the service of others. And there were some fantastic images, particularly with CSC, when you helped Carlos Sastre be able to win the Tour de France and you got the better of Cadel Evans. It must have been a pretty big moment.
Yeah, it was. I was taken into CSC to be the team captain. My sprinting days were over and long gone. But yeah, to take on that role and trying to control 8 different nationalities of big egos, the Schlecks, Jens Voigt, Cancellara, Carlos Sastre, it was really challenging, but to deliver that, you know, that was our first Tour de France victory. It was my first Tour de France victory overall, so to be the team captain and behind the scenes just putting out fires in the hotel rooms for 3 weeks, not to mention the 100k on the front every day. It was hard work, but it was, yeah, obviously going up against Cadel wasn't ideal, but you know, I think I was one of the first guys to go and, you know, acknowledge him after and you know, congratulate him a bit later on when he won a couple of years later. But yeah, we're all paid professionals and we're all out there to do a job.
We saw that image of you with Cadel. That was after the time trial in Grenoble, and you all caught the train together to go into Paris. And
that wasn't very awkward, was it?
No. But well, what was it like?
Awkward. Yeah. You know, you kind of, again, we all walk in and there's Cadel, and the media were again trying to hype up this big conflict of hate between us, but you know, the mutual respect is massive. I mean, you know, as an Australian, I wanted Cadel to win. As a professional cyclist, I wanted him, you know, want us to win. So, you know, I've got a job to play, and that was to win the Tour de France. And you know, Cadel was pretty cool about it. But when he actually won, it was very special as well.
A pretty significant moment in the history of Australian cycling.
Absolutely, very well deserved. I mean, you know, when you think about, you know, young guy from Barwon Heads and the journey that Cadel's had in mountain biking and just coming from Australia. I mean, anyone that's rides a bike and we'll go over to Europe. You know, it's a bit of a novelty, especially when I went over there. I think, you know, Phil was called Skippy and I was like the little kangaroo or the wallaby or whatever they called me. You know, it's a bit of a novelty, and then you start winning and you know, other guys start believing and other girls start believing what they can do and that nothing's impossible. Next minute, you know, you've got you know, Gero winning every bike race on the planet, Mark Renshaw, you know, a young Bathurst boy becoming probably one of the world's best ever lead-out riders, not to mention everything else that he's done in his career. You know, it just inspires a whole bunch of other kids to believe that nothing's impossible.
There was another big step, and Jerry Ryan unfortunately isn't here today because of the circumstances with the family, someone passing away, but it was a big decision for you to leave the team that you were with. It was the number one team in the world, and then you join a team that didn't have a major sponsor. It just had Jerry Ryan backing it under the brand of Green Edge, and they were looking for a sponsor. What gave you the belief that team could work?
Well, I didn't know if it could work or not. It was really tricky. That time in my career, I was just kind of, you know, starting to think about retirement. You know, we were winning all the big classics with Fabian. We were winning the Tour de France. I just moved my family to Luxembourg. We'd bought a house. The kids were in school. You know, I just moved him to the Leopard Trek team. So I'd kind of mapped out finally the final steps of my career, and then the phone rings on my birthday. I've got Frank and Andy Schleck in my house drinking my beer, and it's, you know, Shane and Jerry calling to say, you know, can we lure you to a team? And I'm like, this really isn't good timing. I've got the Schlecks downstairs. Can you call me back tomorrow? And I went down and Frank's like, who was that? I'm like, oh, no one, no, nothing. But I actually I told them, I said, you know, there's an opportunity with an Australian team, and both of them on the spot said, mate, feel no obligations to stay here. We've just done exactly the same. Yeah. You know, they left CSC because there was now a Luxembourgish team, and it was an opportunity, and it was a lot of pride and privilege and honour to ride for an Australian team. So at first I told Shane and Jerry no, just to bump up the dollars really. But luckily he's not here, because geez, they're overpaid. But, you know, eventually after I sat around and thought about it, I actually just thought, what would it be like to be the first race of the year, the Tour Down Under, as a part of a Leopard Trek team when the brand new Australian team gets presented? And I went, yeah, no, I've got to be on the Australian team. So there we go.
One of the really big moments with that team, and Simon is with us today on table 18, was at the Tour de France. Over in Corsica, Simon won the stage. He beat Peter Sagan. The next day in Nice was a team time trial. You won the team time trial and you moved Simon Gerrans into the yellow jersey. That must have been a huge moment for all of you.
That was a massive moment. It's probably one of the highlights of my career. You know, when you win a team's time trial, you want to make sure you're on a really good day because they're not a lot of fun. But, you know, we're a brand new team without really understanding any of our potentials or what we're capable of. Luckily, we had our gun, Gero, who'd won the national championships, the Tour Down Under, Milan-San Remo, and it just kept going and going and going. So, you know, we're going all right here, aren't we? Dan Jones was trying to make us look like idiots with the backstage passes, and we basically said, if we don't win races, we're going to look like absolute idiots. So, luckily, Gero won all the races. But yeah, going into that Tour de France time trial was really special, and especially at, you know, 40 years of age, it was nice to stand up on the top step of the podium and with the boys, you know, plus the yellow jersey. So I couldn't get any better.
It was incredible. Moving on to your role now as the director of the Tour Down Under, we saw some images of you winning the first ever edition of the Tour Down Under. What causes more sleepless nights, trying to win it or organise it?
Well, I'm still trying to organise my first World Tour race 3 years later. Definitely the organisation. Yeah, I think as a rider, we don't really understand the behind the scenes of the logistics, the working with councils. I mean, the course design is a lot of fun. That's probably the highlight of what I do. And the guys really aren't going to like me next time. I've got a very short memory of what it was like because it'll be pretty hard. But yeah, definitely the organisation behind. We've got a great team over in South Australia. You know, I've been very lucky to take over the reins from Mike Turter, who
big shoes.
Yeah, big shoes to fill. And he was a real, you know, the whole team was attention to detail. So, the guys have just come back from Europe from a few weeks, and all the teams are genuinely excited to be coming back to Australia. They love the race, they miss it because they get treated like rock stars, and they get looked after very well. So it's either that or a training camp in the south of Spain. So they'd all prefer to be in Adelaide and then Victoria.
Yeah, it's fascinating for me seeing somebody who's retired from racing and their different perspective. I've been in commentary the last couple of nights or so on the Giro with Mark Renshaw, and there's 5 kilometres to go, and he's now the safety manager for the World Championships in Wollongong, and he says they shouldn't have a speed hump there. That barrier's in the wrong place. And we're looking who's in third wheel, Mark, and you're worried about the safety elements.
I have been listening to that, Mark. Very short memory. Normally you'd be like more carnage and more chaos. Certainly now I watch a race and all I'm looking at is risk assessment, which is certainly something I didn't do when I was riding.
No, clearly, based on the amount of injuries that you went through before. Yeah. For South Australia, actually on behalf of most Melburnians in the room, you're happy to have the Formula One Grand Prix back and we'll spot with the 2DU?
No, it's all right. I think we can have the Formula One back though.
As well.
Yeah. Look, it's just such an honour and a privilege to work on the event. As I said, I'm an Adelaide boy, growing up on those roads, so just knowing every corner and every speed hump, every tree root, every manhole cover in the whole of the state. Mick did a fantastic job, but the race has really developed now into something with the World Tour points. The guys are coming down much better prepared than when I first won it. Most of them hadn't even ridden their bike by the time they'd come down to Adelaide. They've just gone through a European winter. So now the guys are rocking up, fully prepared. The points are on offer. It's World Tour. It's just like the Australian Open. There's a lot of points on offer. The guys are coming down with serious form, and it's just a lot of fun and a privilege to be a part of it.
How important is it for you to have a marquee athlete come down and draw the crowds in? And we saw the impact of Lance Armstrong when he made his return and raced there, and then Peter Sagan a few years later on. How significant is that?
Very. Yeah, I mean, I've had a lot of time to design a course which, as Mike handed over the keys, he was like, I'm going to be really interested to see what you do with the race. Mick was an Olympic gold medalist and raced a lot on the track, but he hadn't raced professionally in Europe. So obviously after, many years in Europe, there's a few little things that I'd like to bring to the event to kind of make it a little bit more exciting, I guess, I can see it from a bike.
You want to share?
No, I can't share too much right now. But I can tell you it'll be pretty cool. It'll be a good race. I spent a lot of time tweaking stages. We've managed to put on the Festival of Cycling for the last 2 years to really keep the heart beating, to keep make sure there's a cycling race going on in Australia. I know the domestic teams really enjoyed it. And it was great to get back to that, be able to offer those guys a platform to race on. There's great sponsors to look after. But now we really want to focus back on that World Tour international level and come out swinging.
South Australia hosts a lot of events. They put on a lot of events to draw people in. It's an event first before it's a bike race or a music festival or whatever it is to get people in the door. Where does the Tour Down Under sit?
It sits on top. Yeah, it is the biggest annual, international event in South Australia. We take a lot of pride in that, and for me as a cyclist and someone that's spent most of their life riding a bike, it's a lot of pride in seeing the guys and the girls come down to Adelaide and perform in front of our crowds. It's a great opportunity. It's a great opportunity for business behind the scenes. There's a lot of good big stakeholders. A lot of important sponsors to look after, and we just want to deliver them the best possible race.
And in 2023, do you think you'll have a rider at the Tour Down Under who's Australian and comes in as the winner of the Giro d'Italia?
Hopefully. Jai did message me a few months ago, and because I've been pestering to try and get the Australians to come home for the Festival of Cycling, which obviously the majority of them decided to stay in Europe because of travel restrictions and so on. But Jai messaged and said, yeah, no, I'm coming, mate. You don't have to keep asking. So, look, fingers and toes and everything else crossed that we can have our first Giro, Australian Giro winner. Already what he's doing is remarkable. We've set a very high bar with the likes of Cadell, Brett Lancaster winning the prologue back in
2005.
There we go.
1.2 kilometres pancake straight.
I think I finished 7th, but I forgot what year. But yeah, it's just great to see, Robbie McEwen's won how many stages?
12.
Yeah, okay. I might just start doing the interviewing, hey? But yeah, it's just fantastic, and I think the bar's been raised so high now across the board, whether it's Gero winning Liège, Amstel, Matty Hayman winning Roubaix, Matty Goss winning San Remo, Tour de France stages, Ben O'Connor finishing fourth in his first ever Tour de France. I mean, it's mind-boggling.
Yeah.
You're kind of starting to take it for granted already, aren't we? Like, how the hell can a guy ride his first Tour de France and finish fourth? I think it is mind-boggling. So to see the likes of Jai up there, really fighting it out, he looks good. He's probably not as strong as Carapaz for the time trial, but it's strange what can happen after 3 weeks of racing.
It is indeed. And all those people that you've spoken about, the current generation, they had to have somebody to follow. As you followed Phil Anderson, they followed you. And it's not the result sheet that is the most significant. It's the perseverance, the resilience to come back from horrific injuries and setbacks to set the agenda for the other Aussies to follow. So thanks for everything you've done for Australian cycling. Put your hands together for Stuart O'Grady. I think I definitely need more sleep. I'm getting tongue-tied a few times today. But one of the guys who's been keeping me company as I've been staying awake on the Giro d'Italia is a guy who was renowned throughout his career as the world's best lead-out rider. He delivered Mark Cavendish so many times to victory, and the greatest image that I can remember of this guy is on the Champs-Élysées in 2009. Mark Cavendish was winning, and the guy who first had his arms up and finished in second position was Mark Renshaw. Put your hands together for Mark Renshaw. Firstly, what I want to know is how you go from being a junior world champion in the team sprint, doing 3 laps of a velodrome, to wanting to ride for 3 weeks and 3,500 kilometres around France.
It definitely took a little bit of time, Matt. It wasn't just that clear cut. It took years and years, and what a transition to go from track sprinting with the likes of Ryan Bailey, Joby Dacre, Ben Kirsten, some of these famous names off the track, to riding in the Tour de France, and riding the Tour de France alongside Stuart O'Grady, Matt Wilson, Simon Guerin, some of my best mates. So huge transition.
It's funny that you mentioned those names, all those sprinters. I can remember calling Mark Cavendish the fastest bike rider in the world when he'd won his 4th stage in one of the editions of the Tour de France. I got a text message from Gary Niwan, who was a world sprint champion, and he said, he's the fastest slow guy.
Yeah, that's like sprinting on the road. It's just an amazing feat. You have to get to the end to win.
Yeah.
You have to stay out of trouble, and then you somehow have to put out, around that 1,000 watts and be in the right position. And it's something I really enjoyed. Coming from the track, I was good off a wheel, and learned a lot off the track. And I just took a lot of those things, a lot of the kilo training that I did early on, and put that into the road. And it helped with my short power in the end of stages.
Trying to give people an analogy of how road sprinting works, I use athletics as an example, and it is you run a marathon and then you line up at the end of the athletics track and you have to do 100 metres.
It's pretty close, except you got maybe 1,000 different decisions every day to make just to stay on the bike, stay upright, because there's so much. We've seen some of the crashes. You have split-second decisions where you need to determine whether you go left or right and stay upright. So there's a lot more to it. Getting to the end of every stage upright is a challenge in itself. And I don't know how many times, we dodge death on the bike in the Tour de France at these races, and then you have to get to the finish and you still somehow got to get in position.
Some of the best stages are the ones where it's flat and it's windy as opposed to the ones in the mountains. And one of the most famous stages that I can recall with you was to the Grand Mot in 2009. The race split to pieces, and I think you had 8 of your 9 teammates from HTC in the front group.
Yeah, definitely. It was one of our most iconic stages. And one, now that I can look back, being out of the sport for a little while, you can really appreciate it. At that stage in HTC High Road, we had some of the best riders. Bert Gruppetto, you're in that situation, and all of a sudden you're in an echelon with 20 riders, with Lance Armstrong, and they're all willing you to go full gas to the end. And you're thinking, this is our race to lose. We had Mark Cavendish in the front. Everything panned out all right. But yeah, looking back, some of the names that were with us and the stress, and for the race to unfold like that in the Tour de France, it always throws up something special. So looking back, yeah, it's one of my favourite stages.
You had George Hencappy was with you on your team. You had Bernard Eisel, Michael Rogers, yourself, Mark Cavendish, Bert Grapps, who you mentioned.
Montfort from Belgium.
Yep.
So yeah, we had a cracker team, and some legends of the sport right there. And that year was amazing.
And so you had Lance Armstrong in that front group with you, but his teammate and the team leader, Alberto Contador, was in the second group. What did Lance say?
Maybe that's why he was so encouraging to come through really fast. So it worked out quite well, and we know at that situation there was a big head-to-head with those two. But yeah, look, I felt like I was a little bit out of my depth being in that echelon, but as it was, the team rode well. Cavendish won the stage, one of I think 5 that year. So amazing times.
Yeah, and you had Tony Martin with you, who wasn't yet a star at that point, but he's a strong personality, Tony Martin. I believe he had a bit of a run-in at some point with Lance.
Yeah, we only spoke about that on air just the other night. So that just shows the mentality of Tony. He was a leader from day one. Not necessarily the biggest voice in the room, but authority-wise, you come in first or second year professional and you're telling Lance Armstrong to pipe down, pull your head in, we'll do the job. So that was Tony Martin, and as it was, he went on to be one of the best in the business in the time trials. But Lance had been out and then back into the sport, so it probably progressed a little bit while he took a couple of years off.
I always thought Tony Martin had a knee injury when he rode a time trial because he always had tape on his knee, but that's not the case.
Yeah, that was another thing we discussed. He always had, if you'd seen the physio tape on the left knee, and that's basically when he was in time trial position, he could look down and knew that he had to focus on pulling through with that left leg. So just, we all have seen all the articles in the media around Sky and the 1%ers. So that was the 1% for Tony Martin, was to focus on his left leg. But it's another thing that shows that he's a great champion, because I was just going out to try and be in the time cut. He's going out there trying to focus on using his left leg.
Outside the time cut.
Yeah, and often he put us very close.
Yeah, he's a brilliant athlete to watch. When did you discover that being a lead-out rider was your thing? How did that come about? It
was a process over a couple of years. So I turned professional with Matty Wilson at Francis de Jure, Bradley McGee, Baden Cook. I was into a superstructure there. A lot of Aussie guys, great fun. And then I didn't really get the results that they were hoping for. Yeah. So I ended up leaving to Credit Agricole about the same time that Stewie moved out of Credit Agricole. I moved in. Won a couple of races, didn't really, in cycling it's hard, you're paid to win. And if you don't win, very quickly you're either put out the back door or you find another role. So at that stage I found a role with Tour Hushoff. We went to the Tour de France and clicked really well. We did some good stages. He won one of the first stages there. 1 year in the Tour de France, and I loved it. It really excited me. I enjoyed it. We all know cycling's a team sport. So to get that opportunity to try to help other teammates, it gave me the same satisfaction as winning. And I was probably a little bit realistic that I wasn't as fast as some of these guys. I just didn't have it. I was missing that final, 1% to win. Yeah. But there was another area that I excelled in, and that was putting guys in position, understanding what the needs were behind me. And so once I was successful, I really enjoyed that. And from there, it was, the rest is history. I hooked up with Mark Cavendish the following year at HTC, and we clicked really well together. Very different personalities, but somehow it worked well.
We'll come back to Mark in a minute. You spoke about being realistic about where you're at. You'd established yourself as the best lead-out rider in the world, and then you left that team and you went to Rabobank to have another go on your own. And even in hindsight, I think that's absolutely the right decision to have made. So at least you gave yourself a chance.
Yeah, look, there was a lot of stress there at that moment. Obviously, when HTC folded, that was then the second team. I was in Credit Agricole, it folded, and then we went to HTC and it folded. So I was like, time to clear out. And I got the chance at Rabobank, and it all come about because at that stage Sky was starting. They'd signed Cavendish. They made me really lowball offer, not very interesting, and I think that's because they didn't really want me to go with Mark Cavendish to Sky.
You needed Stewie to do the negotiation for you.
Yeah, well, I could have leaned on him, but as it was, I got, I had the opportunity with Rabobank, and I didn't want to go to Sky and then not race with Mark Cavendish, put in the B program. You know, they had objectives to win the Tour de France, but with a British rider, obviously they wanted Cavendish there. So, I broke his heart and I left him. So he still brings it up now. He still doesn't forgive me. Yeah. And
how'd you get the marriage back on the tracks then?
well, he had a couple of slim years at Quickstep. So he went there and then he had, one of the best sprinters ever, Alessandro Petacchi, leading him out, and it was all going wrong. So he said to Patrick Lefebvre, look, I need Mark Renshaw back. And from that stage, negotiated the contract and hooked back up with him at Quickstep 2 years later.
Was that a nice phone call to get?
From Cav or from Patrick?
Well, either actually.
No, it's look, I spoke to him a lot, and he knew, he understands the reasons why I left him. Looking back, that's the kind of character he is. He's kind of all in, and he's very emotional. So he forgave me, and look, we won a lot more stages together afterwards in Quickstep, and then at Team Dimension Data.
We saw him last year at the Tour de France and he won 4 stages. It was incredible. But then there was an image of him at the front of the team bus before one of the stages, and Eddie Merckx was there. He just equalled Eddie Merckx's record, and he just went bunter at the mechanic. He wasn't happy with something or other, and he steamed off and he threw the bike at the mechanic and huff and puff into the bus.
It's look, that's pure Mark Cavendish, and it's just he's not so angry. He's not so much angry at the mechanic. He's just enthusiastic and
enthusiastic. I don't know if the mechanic thought it was enthusiastic.
He's probably not the best word, but as Stewie explained, and he spoke about Cancellara. Yeah, he's just he's just a ball of energy. Mark Cavendish is the same. Yeah, it's the big champions that wake up like that, and he was the same. Mark Cavendish, he wanted everything to be perfect. Yeah. He expects everything to be perfect, and that day I think I spoke to him after. Anyway, the handlebar wasn't straight, and it may have been straight, but the way he sees it, it wasn't straight. So
therefore, it's not straight.
Well, it's not Mark Cavendish straight, and so that's why he kind of cracked it. He bounced the bike and stormed off, but that's the kind of character he is. He expects everything to be 100%, and that's why he's won. So many stages in the Tour de France and, so many stages of professional cycling. And Guido, the mechanic that was in that video, I also know really well and has worked with Mark Cavendish, I'd say 12 years of his career, knows what Mark Cavendish is like. And you saw his reaction.
Whatever.
Well,
here we go again.
It's straight. We know it's straight, but he thinks it's not. So anyway, that's Mark Cavendish. And
did he just put the Allen key in and take the Allen key out?
Well, he probably loosened it off and said, yeah, there you go, put it sideways and just whatever. Yeah. But he's that kind of rider. He's always changing things. So maybe the next day he went there and it wasn't straight. Now Cav's up him because it's not straight. It's just that's the kind of rider he is. He expects a bloody lot from everyone in the team.
We saw an example of that this year at the Giro d'Italia. He won a stage early on in the race, and then in the interview he spoke about the role the team played, and he said, but Mauro Schmid was meant to chase early and he wasn't there.
Absolutely.
And some people saw that as, keep that in-house, don't criticise him, the team worked really well, but that's the expectation at the highest level.
Look, it's not something that I would do as a rider, but certainly Mark Cavendish would, because he expects, as I mentioned, everyone to give 110%. And in the meeting, obviously, they told Mauro Schmid that he had to be there in the end and pull until 3 kilometres to go. He was nowhere to be seen, so probably not the best to do it after you've won the race, but he threw him under the bus and... maybe the next stage, I know he was there the next stage because we commentated and he was there, doing his job. And that's professional cycling. It's a team sport and you need everybody to chip in.
Stewie spoke about being the team captain and trying to keep those big personalities calm on the bus and around the dinner table. Did you play that role as well?
Yeah, I was probably more just the chaperone for Mark Cavendish. Between Bernie Eisel and myself, we had that role. And it was pretty hard. Sometimes you'd ride around in the bunch behind him and sorry, yeah, sorry. He'd just ride into the back of guys. And, that's probably because he just didn't wear glasses when he normally has glasses and he races without them. So, and we always seem to be riding in the back of Movie Star. So I didn't really like that team anyway, so I wouldn't say sorry to them. And just anyone else you'd say sorry to and excuse Mark Cavendish. But when you win that many stages, you can pretty much ride through the bunch how you want,
Yeah.
but nobody's going to like you.
Yeah. So you chaperoned him off the bike as well, but on the bike you were kind of his bodyguard. And there was one moment in the Tour de France where you took the bodyguard role just a little too seriously, and you introduced yourself to Julian Dean.
I was just trying to kiss him on the shoulder. That's all. I didn't try to headbutt him. I just tried to give him a kiss on the shoulder. As it was, in 2010 I was ejected from the Tour de France for a headbutt or 3. And look,
What happened?
What happened was I just didn't have great legs, really. It came down to I didn't have great legs on that stage. Julian Dean from Garmin at that stage, were you with him, Matty? You're in the team? Maybe we should get Matty up and he can tell us what happened in the team. So Julian kind of got over the top of me with one elbow, sorry. And then, we all know sprinting. The moment you get your elbow in front, you just shut the door. Yeah. And he tried to shut the door. I understood that if he shut the door, Mark Cavendish wouldn't win the stage. And then I think just that inner track cycling came out that day, and I gave him one headbutt. It didn't really move him. I gave him 2, and it still didn't move him. For Christ's sake, just move. Gave him 3, and he just moved 20 centimetres to the right. 20 centimetres. He just opened up enough of the gap that I could squeeze through. Yeah. Cavendish launched super early. He went from, I think, 350, 400 metres that day, and it was a super long sprint. But probably the reason I did get, maybe it was the 3 headbutts, but I think when I came back and closed Tyler Farrar, because I was that angry, I thought, okay, well, this is fine. You want to play this game, we'll play this game. And I swung out, and then I sprinted back in and closed Tyler Farrar. Right. So I probably got ejected for that move as well.
Okay. And then there was the race commentary played a part of it. The French commentator, Jackie Duron, he was up in arms. And then the UCI commissaires, instead of watching a vision without any commentary, they watched the vision with Jackie's commentary saying you should be kicked out of the tour. It's Jackie's fault. It wasn't yours.
There's so many factors that went into this. And Jackie Duron, he didn't help me at all. Over French commentary, he was just screaming in French, he's got to go. You can't do that. So Peugeot, the race director at that stage, it didn't take him very long. I think it only took him, 2 minutes of footage, and he decided to throw me out.
How'd you sleep that night?
Not really good. So obviously I felt I'd let the team down. Everyone in the team was furious because their opinion was we'd be treated unfairly. But looking back now, it was a defining moment in my career. I wouldn't have done anything different in that situation. I wouldn't have given the stage away. And probably if I did anything else, we would have crashed.
Yeah, and I reckon if the schoolyard rules, if everybody was lined up against the wall and you had to pick somebody to be on your side to go into battle, on the back of that, you'd be one of the first picked, I'd suggest.
Yeah, probably, but it takes a lot to get to that stage. I think generally I'm pretty calm and collected, but when you're 10 days into the Tour de France and you're back against the wall, sometimes you don't make the best decisions. And looking back, I thought I made the right one.
You white line fever?
I think just chasing the victory, and I was obviously, I think at that stage it was our 3rd or 4th in the first 10 days. So we were on a roll, and we thought we were a little bit invincible, bit off a little bit too much.
How much conversation happens at the front of the peloton, 5Ks to go, and you're doing 55 Ks per hour leading up for a sprint? Or not conversation, yelling?
Well, to be honest, there's a lot of yelling, but nobody can hear anything. You pretty much... you're just guided just by a glance over the shoulder. There's that many crowds and the chopper noise, it's the atmosphere. So within the final 5 kilometres, it all comes down to just hoping that Mark Cavendish should follow my wheel and I made the right decisions, where to move. And obviously you've got a whole team in front of you making decisions for you. But there's just a few brief words, and left, right, and yes and go.
Trust must be enormous.
Yeah, for sure. You have to have trust in each other in that situation. He had a hell of a lot of trust in me. It started off not perfect, but over time you get a lot of trust in each other. And once you start winning, the momentum, you start to get on a roll, and then it's easier to trust once you have some wins.
What's it like for you now in the commentary box, watching a race and commentating on it, and seeing last night where it's a day for the sprinters? They made a mess of it, or did the breakaway just prove to be too strong? And it looked to me last night sitting next to you as if you were almost in the race.
Well, that's what I love. I love just watching it. I'm loving the commentary. It's something it's only new to me. Being alongside Macca and yourself, of course, it's just a breeze. I feel like I'm in the race sometimes, and especially these sprint stages, because that screen's so big in front of us. You imagine that you're in the race. And yeah, seeing the stage last night, and just thinking from my point of view as a captain, what I would have done differently. So you can do that as a commentator watching the race. But there will certainly be some frustrated teams and some riders, because they gave the stage away last night just by not riding probably the right tactics in the peloton.
Do you enjoy giving your appraisal of the sport? Because you were pretty blunt, and afterwards, after each stage, we do a who delivered and who disappointed, and you were pretty heavy on who disappointed by criticising Cav's team and Arnaud Demar's team. Yeah,
I was, because I know how much work they put in to chase that stage victory, and look, we saw how disappointed some of those guys were. We saw Arnaud Demar on the stage, and he was extremely disappointed because there's no more opportunities, and you just can't let those chances go. And for them to balls up a stage like that, there was 4 big riders, and Matty Wilson just told me, he was the director for Alfini there only a few years ago, and he told me he's a classy rider, and when you've got 4 classy riders like that in front, you can't give them that much leeway.
How excited are you about the World Championships in Wollongong and your role, safety manager?
I'm a little bit...
Safety manager. It's kind of ironic after the story with Julian. Have you spoken to Julian about this role?
No, he endorsed me. No, I'm really looking forward to the World Championships. I'm being honest, the course is super difficult. Yeah. I would have liked to have seen an easier course where the riders make the race, but I think the course that's been selected, the best riders, and we'll see the same guys. We're going to see Van der Poel, we're going to see, depending, Alaphilippe, whether he comes back. It's that kind of course. Caleb Ewan, he's going to be around the mark, but it's that back end that, once you do 220, 230 kilometres, it just is going to be so draining. But I know he's got a focus to lean up and get better at climbing. But the course, it's super difficult. It's got all the biggest highlights of Wollongong. We're up over Mount Kira. We've got a super, super steep climb on the circuit and a relatively flat sprint. So, riders make the race, and it's going to be exciting.
Now, when you reflect on your career, what do you think your teammates would say about Mark Renshaw? Not necessarily the sprinters that you looked after, but the other guys that you worked with.
We got a couple here. So, spent a lot of time with Matty and Simon in a team. Didn't get to ride alongside Stewie. But I think I'm not the biggest personality in the room. I don't come in and yell and scream and jump up and down, but I think when I was part of teams, when I spoke, everybody listened, and I got a lot of respect. So I think they'll all admit I was hopefully a good rider and a good leader.
You're definitely a good rider. I think you could be summarised in the simple phrase as Mr. Reliable.
Well, that's a great way. I'd be more than happy to have that kind of tagline. And there was a hell of a lot of times that I gave everything for my teammates, and I absolutely loved it. Very fortunate enough, it's given me a career and a great life. So I can look back and I'm extremely proud.
Well, you were the #1 lead-out man of your generation and the greatest lead-out man in the history of Australian cycling. Put your hands together for Mark Renshaw.
Thank you.